What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Cast Me Outside with me, your host, Aaron Scholl. Today's date is March 10th. It's Mario Day 2025. We will not be talking about Mario. We're going to talk about the warrior archetype. I'll give my little intro for the entire show, and then we'll start digging into the warrior and see where it takes us. But yeah, welcome to Cast Me Outside. If this is your first time here, hey, I'm Aaron. This is my little show. It kind of functions as a podcast. It's part video diary journal and part advice section. And then on other episodes, we'll go deeper on topics I feel like talking through, for lack of better words. And recently we've been on the mission to go through King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. These are Jungian archetypes that were fleshed out in greater detail by Robert Moore and Gillette. And they have a book by that name, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. We did a King episode. We're doing Warrior today. It's been a couple weeks coming. And this is by no means meant to be in any way like a definitive description of warrior. It actually it was really cool to dig into King, and it was really fun to dig into warrior. I'm actually feeling like I didn't give King the amount of research it needed. I'm still happy with what I learned, and so who knows, maybe this will be like a cycle. Maybe for a couple years, we'll have one of these episodes a year or something. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds? So, not a normal episode today. Today, we're going into the warrior archetype, and I gave you guys a little bit of a summary of why and where that came from. It comes from Jungian psychology, the psyche. The archetypes are kind of like the personalities of your psyche. And they can express themselves, and you can have an overbalance or an underbalance of the archetype, and really it's up to like yourself to kind of regulate these energies, not get like possessed by them. But yeah, let's go into warrior. Warrior is actually pretty cool. When I was doing research, I was using ChatGPT, and I got like a lot of vibes that warrior and king overlapped, but then as I kind of dug deeper into it, I've come to appreciate the warrior energy as distinct. But there was a moment there where I was like, this just kind of sounds like you're rewording a king trait and saying it's a warrior trait. But let's just go through some of my notes. Let's talk about like maybe the symbolisms. Like we can talk a warrior, a knight. I think Jung being German or from Europe, they all had a lot of knights and kings and castles. So I think that's where a lot of his symbolism is rooted in. But it is striking to see, the same, character like as a samurai all the way on the other side of the world, and warriors. It's the masculine energy. So they carry a sword and a shield. And you'll notice all of these masculine archetypes, they have a phallic. The king has a staff. The knight has his sword. The mage has a wand or a magic staff. And then the lover has his actual, the real thing as I believe Moore called it. He has I forget, lingus? I don't know if he called it that. So the warrior is the doer. It's action. He is on a mission. A lot of times warriors swear their loyalty. And in the old times, this was cool. The warrior would kind of paint his values on his shield, like if he was fighting for his homeland, if he was fighting for his family, and that was supposed to kind of symbolize like that was what he was defending. Like use your shield to defend. So I thought that was interesting. And then the sword, like swords kind of cut through bullshit. It's kind of like the power a man has to enact his will. And then the armor. So it can be emotional armor, which I think is really interesting. It can be like physical armor. When someone is so possessed by warrior energy, their mission is above all. And they'll, they're willing to die for their mission. And sometimes that's important. Like you need to die for your country or die for what you value if that's at risk. Times when it's life or death, they can actually be adaptive, that this part of your psyche could take over and kind of make you sacrifice yourself. But in times of like modernity, where you're maybe a warrior in like a career way, like you treat your career like your war, that can it's going to result in you not having time for your family or the other aspects of your personality. So these warriors can become overly loyal and workaholics. Something that's interesting that Moore said is the warrior is like the most loyal of the archetypes. So if you don't have any trouble staying true to your like relationships, you're not really swayed by or lured by or tempted by other prospects, then you probably are pretty well suited in your warrior energy. But like I said, if you're loyal to your mission to a fault, you'll allow your relationships and other parts of your psyche kind of wither. But yeah, back to armor. So the armor is interesting. So yeah, like I said, it's emotional and it's physical armor. So like that, you'll be so committed to your mission that you'll be emotionally walled off. And also someone possessed by the warrior, they'll not be able to feel pain. They actually won't feel pain. They'll be able to push themselves and work harder and later and not really register that pain. I mean, I'm sure it's still doing damage, but in the moment when they're on their mission or on the front lines, they're actually not going to feel the pain. And I feel like pain is so much a part of the warrior that's why it's shadow warrior. The shadow side kind of manifests itself as masochism. So I think a good definition of masochism is the love of pain. And I think a warrior who is more on the shadow side. So each shadow has like a polarity. That's kind of why I'm saying that shadow side. So I think the warrior's polarities are this masochists who love pain. Like that's the way that it unhealthily projects or shows up in people's life. And then the other way that it unhealthily projects or shows up in people's life is inaction. Like I said earlier, the warrior is your soldier who goes out and gets stuff done. The warrior's a soldier, but he's your muscle. So it's funny that a warrior wears armor because it's also like the least emotional. So like it can be a good thing to have this, to have your armor. Like obviously you wouldn't want to be a warrior without your armor, but you can get to a point where you can't connect with people, I guess. Your emotions are so walled off, or you can get to a point where you literally don't feel pain and you're destroying your body. So obviously the armor is a huge part of this symbol of the archetype. And I don't have much to say about this, but actually maybe this could pivot to something different. So more breaks down some of the colors of the knights. So there's a white knight, there's a red knight, and there's a black knight. And it's so interesting. It's so interesting that social justice warrior and white knighting, if you don't know those terms. So a social justice warrior is progressive that tries to, I guess, claim more territory for the progressive ideology, essentially, by calling out things that don't fall in line, that go against their values, which is usually, or at least it seemed to start as, just pure masculinity. I don't know about just pure masculinity. Forgive me for some of this wording, but it seemed like the social justice warrior's enemy was masculinity. I think in fair criticism of the antisocial forms of masculinity and the warrior energy, like, yeah, that is destructive and doesn't have a place in society. But I think in maybe like Steelman, that point of view, and Steelmanning that point of view, people allowed the social justice warriors to kind of lump in all masculine behaviors, maybe some that are positive or just maybe annoying to people who are easily annoyed, and they kind of was able to do like a public I guess it's public shaming is what it is. That's kind of what they do. They were kind of able to shame masculinity in the guise of trying to protect people from the shadow side. But really what they were doing was, I don't know if they were protecting people from the shadow side, but they were belittling all of masculinity, it seemed like. But yeah, it's so funny that these social justice warriors, it's a projection, It's their, we call them a warrior. It's kind of like projecting onto them what that they were trying to do away with. And by being a social justice warrior whose main mission is to attack masculinity, they kind of were able to oust the energy that would stand up to them, because they could frame anybody standing up to them as toxic masculinity. So it's kind of like a warrior that took it's kind of like a shadow warrior that did a PR campaign against its good side, and I don't know, it's a mess. Actually, I wrote, if we're gonna be on this part. So the social justice warriors, they've been possessed to take action for their ideology, and their ideology shames aggressive warrior energy. And if that shaming is successful, thus protects them from the kinds of people that would stand up for the values a social justice warrior opposes. Okay, I stand by that. So yeah, guys, I'm still grappling with a lot of these, but there's something really good there in just the irony and the projection of social justice warriors, and I may have not articulated that to the best of my ability. But let's go on to white knighting, because it's so funny, because social justice warriors and white knights kind of go hand in hand. So if you don't know what white knighting is kind of a diss against men who shame other men in defense of women that they probably don't have a chance with, but they're probably defending them in a way to appear like a better choice. I think we all ultimately know it comes down to wanting to reproduce. So it's so a white knight will shame other men in an attempt to look like a righteous guy, he has white armor, it's pure, and but the thing is it's not really pure. It's like this naive, it's like this naive, like narcissism, or this naive Machiavellianism, where he thinks he can like kind of play the social game and gain more status and have a chance with the girl he's defending, when in reality he probably isn't masculine enough, and probably the girl he's defending would like someone who the White Knight is shaming instead of the White Knight himself. But what did Robert Moore said about the White Knight is that he's the most likely to commit torture. I think with the pain and the masochism, I think it's like, I don't know if they love pain or they feel like they've been hurt so much that they just got to project it on everyone, that they want to see other people feel the way they feel inside. But that's like a big part of a shadow warrior is the masochism. There's this great quote by Andrew Tate. Holy shit, Andrew Tate, and it's not a great quote, but it's a great look into this shadow warrior, and he is just like kind of says a couple sentences, like it's not like a super rant, but it's like concise. Just that, like, I felt so much pain. I keep feeling pain, and if you're not willing to feel pain, you don't deserve it. And then these masochists, they'll kind of sometimes say, "Oh, this pain that I'm inflicting on you, it's for your own good. It'll actually help you grow." So I think you got to be careful for that. That's probably someone who's possessed by a shadow warrior. So, okay, we talked a little bit about white knighting. We fumbled through social justice warrior. I just think it's amazing that those two warrior symbol, like the warrior symbols, are taken for those people that are against masculine energy. And I just think that's like a beautiful projection. It's so crazy how society was able to kind of name those straight out of like archetypes. Yeah, okay, we talked a little bit about White Knight. The Red Knight is the knight of passion. He's just so overwhelmed by passion. I forget exactly what Robert Moore would say, but you can think about that. I think my mind would always go white and blood, but I think that, I mean red and blood, but I think that it's more passion. And then the Black Knight, that's the knight that you kind of want, despite maybe him being scary, but he's integrated. He's integrated his shadow. He's not naive like the White Knight, or also probably naive like the Red Knight too. Because the Red Knight is just so overrun by passion that they don't think clearly, which is the Knight's best. That's not a best attribute, but it's one of his best attributes, is being a strategic thinker. So you think about famous warriors, you think about Sun Tzu, this famous general, The Art of War. If you've ever read The Art of War, it's very dry. It's very much like, in this scenario, do this. It's not super emotional. It's not like, oh, but if you don't feel like doing it, it's like if the battlefield's set up like this, or approach this like that, like it's very strategic thinking. Chess is war. It's a game of strategy. It's like chess kind of uses a lot of knight and king symbolism. I think the knight and the king energy, I think they're like kind of close, because you think about the king like knights the knight. So if the king is like the vision of your life, then your knight is kind of how you're going to execute your vision, and hopefully you do it strategically. And there's mercenaries. Mercenaries they're not knights. They don't have any values. They talk about boundaries. I think that's what confused me when I was said in the very beginning that I was kind of seeing a lot of king in the night when I first did my research, and that kind of discouraged me. And I think it's because the boundaries. So king kind of has a realm, but a knight kind of sets boundaries and I think he kind of defends boundaries. And I think this is like in people's life, this is a little bit more abstract. It's like the boundaries of your values is I think what he defends. But they love training. Training's a big part of being a knight, and maintaining your sword, keeping your sword sharp and being ready. That is huge. Because it's like you never know when you're gonna need to defend your values. I think that's what that is. I think it's like the focus and the discipline to do something that is good, but maybe it's a time of peace, so you're not training as hard. But that's probably going to cost you in readiness at the very least. And then codes, like not attacking the innocents. Like I would say, like a mercenary, his highest value is his money. He's a sellsword. It's himself. He doesn't fight for anything bigger than him. He doesn't have a transpersonal connection. Oh yeah. And there's this Nietzsche quote that Jordan Peterson uses. Not uses, but yeah, he does. He references a lot. He who knows the why for his existence will be able to bear almost any how. That's a Nietzsche quote. And I think that really embodies warrior energy. Why is the values and how is the action, and bearing the how. It's like that emotional armor, the physical armor you put on, the sword you pick up, the shield you pick up. Like those are the tools you use to bear the how for your why. So yeah, I just love that. That Nietzsche quote just feels a little bit more richer through the context of the warrior archetype. And then a warrior has honor and stuff. A mature warrior's ego is in check. He wouldn't feel it necessary to attack an untrained or even a lesser trained warrior who's misstepping in a way that maybe a passionate knight would. Maybe a red knight, if he's insulted by a youngling or whatever, a warrior in training, a cocky kid. A red knight would maybe let his passion get the best of him, but a mature warrior would be able to see that that's like a kid, that's like someone not worthy of a reaction. I don't know if it's just the secureness or just the wisdom of kind of seeing all the battles and knowing what to choose. I think picking your battles is a part of being the warrior. You can't fight every battle. You gotta define your values and find out where your boundaries are, and be prepared to defend them when they're at risk. Yeah, the potency of the sword. It talks a little bit about the sword versus the dagger. I can talk about like kind of me embracing the warrior energy. I did a year and a half of jiu-jitsu, or maybe about a year of jiu-jitsu, and that was huge. That was warrior energy, 100% training about 2 or 3 times a week for that period, and actually grappling with people. I was never really a super rough kid, so to go into this BJJ and actually like be sweating on people and touching people's like faces, it's like sociably kind of unacceptable touching. Like if you were push someone's chin, like like fighting is is really uncomfortable. Like it's like uh, and I can't say I was comfortable with that. And I put myself through that, and I trained, and it felt good. BJJ was kind of the only time I've ever seen red. That saying, when you get mad, you see red. Oh, and maybe the Red Knight sees red because he's so passionate all the time. And maybe the redness kind of reflects like a type of willingness to spill blood over maybe trivial stuff that a more integrated Black Knight wouldn't mess with, or wouldn't waste his time with or energy with. But yeah, I was fighting this guy. Not fighting. I was grappling this guy, and I watched a YouTube video. He was on my back for like, it felt like forever, and literally I just like had my hand like this to not get choked. Just he was a new guy. I was a new guy too, but he had my back, and I watched a video where it's like, well, you're not gonna get choked out if you can slip your hand in between his arm that was around my neck. And eventually I got out of it. It felt like he was on my back forever. And eventually I got out of it. And just in getting out of that, I was just, getting angrier and angrier because this guy was on my back. It was annoying, but I was doing like, I was feeling pretty cocky, like knowing that like how annoying it was. I wasn't in a get tapped situation. And eventually I got out of it and rolled around, and man, it was just red. And however the things fell, I must have been like over one of his legs. Maybe I was on top of him at this point, and he like some type of half guard or something. But like I said, I don't know. I was seeing red. I just remember having my back be taken and getting annoyed. And just when I was kind of seeing red, I got kneed in the balls very, very hard. And that stopped. From that point on, I wore a cup. And I was like one of the only people that wore a cup. But, dude, protect your junk. And it was right by Thanksgiving, and I was like, I got my potatoes smashed. I kept saying that. That was my funny little dad joke. So we got it's like this kind of creative, boundless movement and centeredness. Ooh, excuse me. That's kind of what you embody when you're crushing it with your king energy. Shiva, that mask. I don't know if you know much about the Hindu gods. I couldn't break down, but the Shiva is the kind of the Hindu expression of this warrior energy. The sword and the stone. It's and fighting dragons, and the maiden. So the maiden, I think, can kind of represent like your values. I listened to this book called Something of Desire by David Buss. It's an evolutionary psychology book, and it was funny. He was like, men routinely will form like warring parties to go to other tribes and steal their women. Women will never do that. So it's like, obviously men value women to a point where they're willing to fight and commit war for. So maybe that makes the maiden. Like, obviously male psychology of protecting women or procuring their reproduction, procuring their their offspring through a woman is a huge part of the psyche. And women are smaller than men, so it's a good symbol for an innocent, a value, like the value of protecting things or not using unnecessary force or not being ruthless. I think it's a good representation of that, or being gentle when we're with things that deserve or need to be handled with care. And then like Jordan Peterson goes in on the dragon story of the dragon hoards gold. I need to watch like Excalibur or King Arthur. Uh, but I think in the King Arthur story, the knights have to enter the forest where it's the darkest. So it's kind of like the knights need to face their shadow to gain the skills they need to whatever, probably defend their king or the kingdom or the realm. I'm not familiar enough with the story, but then the dragon hoards gold, and the dragon is kind of like this representation of a super predator, and gold is just any. So the dragon is basically any problem, or potentially the biggest problem you have, and then the gold is the reward you get for facing your biggest problem. And your problems hoard gold. So by entering the forest at the darkest point, by facing your shadow and then facing your biggest problems, you'll gain the skills and the rewards you'll need as a integrated man able to wield the sword. It's like kind of like wielding the creative power of the universe is kind of like your sword. That might be a little bit too lofty, but it's an interesting symbol because your sword can be sharp, it can be potent, it can be broken, it can be dull, it can be rusty. And it's like a tool to enforce boundaries. It's kind of like, don't cross this line. I wrote kneel before the king and get knighted. So I don't know, kind of when you surrender to your vision, you can go forth and be the warrior. And then he was getting into like the sword and the stone. And I kind of like seeing the stone as like matter and the sword as like your creative power. I kind of was interpreting it as like when you are in line with nature, you are your most potent. Like when you're in line with the rock, with matter, with nature, then you are your most potent. Or maybe your potency comes from nature. Death is their companion. That was something that someone said in a cool YouTube video. I think reflecting on death is a big part of a warrior. Like I said earlier, you have to be willing to kill or be killed kind of for your values when you're the warrior. So that's like the highest stakes there are. Let's try and wrap this up. I'll wrap this up with like, I just want to make sure I said it. So the warrior is like a strategic thinker who takes action, who sets boundaries. And I talked about the masochist, but I don't think I kind of talked about the other polarity of the shadow, which is like this inaction. I think it's just lethargy or apathy, where you just sit around, you have no vision, you have nothing to stand up for. Maybe it's like entropy. Maybe it's like like depression. I used to, I think I've told this, but I used to say, "Take action, Aaron." Like so, in improv, you kind of get to pick a nickname so we can play a game with it and remember everyone's name in this new social environment where you're meeting new people. So you got to pick your nickname, and I picked Action Aaron because I want to be a man of action. So I think in that time, it was probably like just out of like community college, and kind of I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I needed to take action. So when it came to improv, I was like, I'm Action Aaron. And then there was a guy, Sean, he would always, whenever they were like, who wants to go first? Sean would yell, take action, Aaron. It was actually kind of like a beautiful thing. A little teasing, but that's what I wanted, and I got a cheerleader. Like, how cool is that? Pain is necessary. Don't fall in love with it. It's not your job to distribute the pain onto other people's lives, and don't ignore the pain, because that is a signal that your body is giving you. And don't let entropy take over, and take action, and see if you can find a mission and a why. Figure out how you want what you want. No, figure out why you want, and go take action, and figure out how you're going to do it. All right, that's it for this episode. We talked a lot. I hope you got something from this. If you watched this, I appreciate you so much. As far as my experience with like Jung and the archetypes, I would say, if anything just felt spot on, it was for you. I think a lot of this stuff is interpretation. So if it didn't feel spot on, maybe that was right for someone else. It's not right for you. It's not right for you. And as I learn more about these archetypes, that opinion might change. Maybe I'll be like, no, this represents this. This is the concrete interpretation. But as of right now, I kind of see it as the symbols are personal. So if it didn't resonate, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it wasn't personal. But yeah, thank you so much. It was really great for me to have this opportunity to discuss this archetype. Now we can move on to the magician. Give me 2 weeks to do that. That's kind of how long it took me to do this. And we'll have another episode. We're 50% through the archetypes. All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Cast Me Outside. It's been a lot of fun, but we're done. Gotta run. Thank you this time for your time. And until next time, keep on living and loving. Peace.